A minute later, the lights dimmed in the auditorium, and the footlights came on, casting a reddish glow on the bottom of the curtain. A stout fellow, clean-shaven and cheerful as a baby, wearing rumpled tails and soiled linen, appeared through the brightly lit opening in the curtain and stood before the audience. This was the master of ceremonies, Georgy Biengalski, well known to all of Moscow. "And so, citizens," began Biengalski, smiling a baby-like grin, "now I would like to present—" Here he interrupted himself and began speaking in a different tone. "I see that our audience has increased for the third part of the program. Half the city is here with us today. Just recently, I met a friend and said to him, 'Why don't you come and see us?' Yesterday, half the city was here, and he says, 'But I live in the other half.'" Biengalski paused, expecting a burst of laughter. But when none came, he continued, "And so I would like to present the famous foreign artiste, Monsieur Woland, in a performance of black magic. Of course, you and I know," here Biengalski smiled a knowing smile, "that there is no such thing in the world as black magic, and it is nothing other than superstition, and that Maestro Woland is simply a master of conjuring technique, a fact which will become obvious in the most interesting part of his performance, that is, when he reveals the secrets behind his technical skill. And so, since we all applaud both expertise and its exposé, let us welcome Mr. Woland." After delivering this whole spiel, Biengalski pressed his palms together and waved them in welcoming fashion at the opening in the curtain, whereupon it drew apart with a soft rustle. The entrance of the magician, with his tall assistant and his cat, who came out on stage on his hind paws, made a big hit with the audience. "An armchair, if you will," Woland commanded softly, and that very second an armchair appeared on stage out of nowhere, and the magician sat down. "Tell me, dear Fagot," inquired Woland of the buffoon in checks, who obviously had another name besides Korolyov, "have the Muscovites changed, in your opinion, in any significant way?" The magician looked out over the hushed audience, which was still stunned by the chair's sudden appearance out of thin air. "Indeed they have, monsieur," was Fagot Korolyov's soft reply. "You are right. They have changed a great deal. On the outside, I mean, as has the city, by the way. Apart from the obvious changes in dress, there are now these, what are they called? Streetcars, automobiles, buses," Fagot chimed in respectfully. The audience listened attentively to this conversation, thinking it was the prelude to the magic tricks. In the crowd of performers and stagehands backstage, Rimsky's pale, tense face could be seen. Biengalski, who had moved to the side of the stage, began to look bewildered. He raised his eyebrows slightly and, taking advantage of the pause, said, "The foreign artiste is expressing his delight with Moscow, which has advanced technologically, and with its inhabitants as well." Here Biengalski smiled twice, first at the orchestra and then at the gallery. Woland, Fagot, and the cat turned their heads toward the master of ceremonies. "Did I really express delight?" the magician asked Fagot. "No, indeed, monsieur, you expressed no delight whatsoever," was Fagot's reply. "So, what is this man talking about?" "He simply lied," pronounced the assistant in checks, booming out his words to the entire theater. And turning to Biengalski, he added, "My compliments, citizen, on your lives." Laughter broke out in the gallery, and Biengalski shuddered, his eyes bulging. "But I, of course, am not so much interested in buses, telephones, and such—" "Apparatus," prompted the fellow in checks. "Exactly so. Thank you," said the magician slowly in a deep bass. "A much more important question is, have the Muscovites changed on the inside?" "Indeed, sir, that is a most important question." Backstage, people began exchanging looks and shrugging their shoulders. Biengalski stood red-faced and Rinsky was pale. But at this point the magician seemed to sense the growing alarm and said, "However, we've gotten carried away, dear Fagot, and the audience is beginning to get bored. Show us something simple, for starters." The audience stirred with relief. Fagot and the cat walked along the footlights to opposite ends of the stage. Fagot snapped his fingers and shouted cavalierly, "3, 4. He then pulled a deck of cards out of thin air, shuffled it, and tossed it like a ribbon to the cat. The latter caught the ribbon of cards and threw it back. The satin snake gave a snort. Fagot opened his mouth wide like a fledgling and swallowed all of it, card after card. After that, the cat made a bow, shuffled his right hind paw, and received thunderous applause. "First class! First class!" people cried rapturously from backstage. Fagot pointed his finger at the orchestra section and announced, "The deck of cards is now, my esteemed citizens, in row 7 in Citizen Parchevsky's possession, that is, lodged just in between a 3-ruble note and a summons to appear in court for non-payment of alimony to Citizeness Zelkova." People in the orchestra began to stir and rise from their seats. And finally, a man whose name was, in fact, Parchevsky, and who had turned red with astonishment, retrieved the deck of cards from his wallet and, not knowing what else to do with it, began poking it in the air. "Keep it as a souvenir," yelled Fagot. "You weren't kidding yesterday when you said at supper that if it weren't for poker, your life in Moscow would be totally unbearable." "That's an old trick," shouted someone from the balcony. "The guy in the orchestra is part of the act." "You think so?" bellowed Fagot, narrowing his eyes at the balcony. "In that case, you're part of the act too, because now the deck is in your pocket." There was a stir in the balcony, and a joyous voice rang out, "It's true! He does have it! Here, but wait! They're 10-ruble notes!" The spectators in the orchestra turned their heads. In the balcony, a perplexed citizen had found a packet of bills in his pocket, wrapped the way they are at the bank, with the words 1,000 rubles written on top. His neighbors descended upon him, while he, flabbergasted, picked at the wrapper with his nail, trying to ascertain whether the notes were real or make-believe. "By God, they're real! 10-ruble notes!" came joyous shouts from the balcony. "Play me a game with a pack like that," said a fat man merrily, who was seated in the center of the orchestra. "Avec plaisir," replied Fagot. "But why just you? Everyone will take part." And he gave a command. "Everybody, look up, please!" 1. A pistol appeared in his hand. 2, he shouted. The pistol jerked upwards. 3, he shouted. There was a flash, a bang, and suddenly white pieces of paper began to rain down onto the hall, falling from the dome ceiling and diving in between the trapezes. They whirled all around, scattered off to the sides, pelted the balcony, piled into the orchestra pit and onto the stage. Within seconds, growing thicker as it fell, the rain of bills had reached the seats, and the audience began catching them. Hundreds of hands went up. People held the bills up to the light from the stage and found watermarks that were perfectly genuine and authentic. The smell of the bills also left no room for doubt. It was the incomparably delectable smell of newly minted money. First merriment and then astonishment swept the theater. It was all abuzz with the words, 10-ruble notes, 10-ruble notes. And happy laughter was heard, and shouts of, "Ah! Ah!" Some people were already crawling in the aisles, looking under the seats, and many were standing on top of their seats, trying to catch the capriciously twirling bills. The faces of the policemen began to look more and more bewildered, and performers piled out from backstage. In the dress circle, a voice was heard saying, "What's that you're grabbing? That's mine. It was coming toward me." Another voice yelled, "Don't push me or I'll push you back." And suddenly a slap was heard, whereupon a policeman's helmet appeared in the dress circle and someone was taken away. The general excitement grew in intensity, and no one knows how it all would have ended if Fagot had not put a stop to the shower of rubles by suddenly blowing into the air. 2 young men exchanged a happy and meaningful glance, got up from their seats, and headed straight for the buffet. The theater was abuzz, and all eyes gleamed with excitement. Yes, Yes, who knows how it all would have ended if Biengalski had not summoned up the strength to do something. Making an effort to regain his composure, he rubbed his hands together in his customary way, and his voice resonated loudly. "Citizens, we have just witnessed an example of so-called mass hypnosis, a purely scientific experiment designed to prove beyond a doubt that there are no miracles and that magic does not exist. Let's ask Maestro Woland to show us how the experiment was done. Now, citizens, you shall see how these paper bills that seem to be money will disappear as suddenly as they appeared." Here he began to clap, but no one joined in. As he clapped, a confident smile played on his face, but that same confidence was not reflected in his eyes. They, on the contrary, were full of entreaty. The audience did not like Biengalski's speech. A total silence ensued, which was then broken by the checked fagot. "Yet another example of what we call balderdash," he announced in a loud, braying tenor. "The paper bills, citizens, are real money." "Bravo!" a bass bellowed out from somewhere on high. "And by the way," said Fagot, pointing at Biengalski, "this fellow is getting to be a bore. He keeps butting in when nobody asks him to and spoiling the performance with his bogus comments. What should we do with him?" "Tear off his head," came a stern voice from the balcony. "What did you say? What was that?" said Fagot, responding to the ugly suggestion. "Tear off his head? Now, that's an idea! Behemoth!" he screamed to the cat. "Do it! 1, 2, 3! Then an incredible thing happened. The cat's black fur stood on end, and he let out a spine-tingling meow. Then he shrunk into a ball and, like a panther, lunged straight at Biengalski's chest and from there leaped onto his head. With a low growl, the cat stuck his chubby paws into the MC's greasy hair and, with a savage howl, tore the head off its thick neck in 2 twists. The 2,500 people in the theater screamed in unison. Fountains of blood spurted from the severed arteries in the neck and poured down the MC's shirt front and tailcoat. The headless body's legs buckled absurdly, and it plopped onto the floor. The hysterical screams of women were heard. The cat handed the head to Fagot, who lifted it up by the hair and showed it to the audience. And the head cried out desperately to the whole theater, "Get a doctor!" "Are you going to keep on talking rubbish?" Fagot inquired of the weeping head in threatening tones. "I won't any more," rasped the head. "Stop torturing him, for God's sake!" shouted a woman in the loge. The magician turned in her direction. "So, ladies and gentlemen, should we forgive him?" asked Fagot, addressing the audience. "Yes, forgive him!" shouted individual and, for the most part, female voices, which then joined with male voices to form a single chorus. "What is your command, monsieur?" asked Fagot of the man in the mask. "Well," the latter replied pensively, "they are like people anywhere. They love money, but that has always been true. People love money, no matter what it is made of, leather, paper, bronze, or gold. And they are thoughtless. But then again, sometimes mercy enters their hearts. They are ordinary people. On the whole, they remind me of their predecessors. Only the housing shortage has had a bad effect on them." And in a loud voice he commanded, "Put his head back on." Taking care to make sure it was on right, the cat plopped the head back in place, and it sat on the neck as if it had never left. And most important, not even a scar was left on the neck. The cat swept his paws over Biengalski's shirt front and tailcoat, and the bloodstains vanished. Fagot lifted the seated Biengalski to his feet, stuck a packet of 10-ruble bills into his coat pocket, and directed him off stage with the words, "Get lost. It's more fun without you."